Good evening, all fellow baseball fans. Tonight, I will be going for my middle relief effort this evening, as I'm not feeling 100%. I will not be going the full 9 innings. My name is Matt Taylor, and tonight we will be talking about a smorgasbord of things. But considering I just got an email about the three new inductees to the Hall of Fame, I think we're going to start with that. And with that, I'm going to move over to Quinn.
Good evening, folks. Quinn Rolo. Looking forward to just go over a little smattering of kind of news topics. We've been going deep into the archives of recent baseball past over the last several episodes. So thought it would be good to kind of touch on some of the present items today, including as Matt alluded to, getting into the Hall of Fame selections from today. So very interested to dig into that a little bit. But before we do, I'll kick it on over to Greco.
Thank you, gentlemen. And Mr. Taylor, you are gonna you're gonna open us up, pitch five quality innings, get a nice little quality start out of you, and
Good.
then rest up, my brother.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so this is going to be an interesting one because I feel like there's been a lot of things that have been happening since we've actually kind of updated everybody about the news and actually spoke about it. But at the same time, there has been a ton. So it's going to be interesting. A lot of interesting free agent signings, a lot of interesting movement here and there as far as things go. None of which happen to have anything to do really with the Red Sox. We'll certainly talk about that too. Um, but yeah, let's open up
God damn it.
with let's open up with the World Series. Sorry, the World Series, the Hall of Fame. So, three getting in this time, gentlemen. Um,
One,
obviously, go ahead.
yeah, one absolute slam. It, it's actually it's actually a kind of a nice encapsulation, a nice microcosm of of the types of players that I think get into the Hall of Fame. Where one is like an absolute slam dunk, no doubter, where the one vote that that he didn't get, that person should be should reveal himself and then get booted out of the voting committee.
Oh,
Uh, um, and then another guy is just like had some good years as a closer, but is not my idea of a Hall of Famer in the least. He would be in the Hall of pretty good. And then another guy who I'm actually really glad that he got in. But you could argue on maybe some stat levels that like, you know, that he's not a slam dunk. I would put it that way. He's not as much of a slam dunk as the other guy that got in is that I alluded to. But I'm glad that he ended up tipping into the got in on that was his first ballot, right? CC
yeah.
Sabathia? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like I just think there's good fodder for discussion on all three of those guys.
Yeah. So Taylor, do you want to break down who got in?
Mm.
Just
So, the slam dunk that Quinn was talking about was Ichiro. Um, so I would argue that he could be uh, I could argue that he could be the biggest slam dunk ever because he had 3,000 hits in the major leagues and in Japan.
right.
So um, he basically had 6,000 hits plus. Um, so, and he was a great outfielder. Um, and I don't know if I'd say he revolutionized the game, but he certainly brought more interest from Japan and their style of baseball from over there. Um, and yeah, he's a no doubter. And then I think with Sabathia, um, for me, and this isn't his fault, it's probably mine. When I heard about the Hall of Fame as a kid in the '80s, I just assumed all the Hall of Famers won 300 games, but unfortunately, that doesn't exist anymore. So he probably should get in first ballot. Uh, Billy Wagner's another whole story altogether. I never thought of him as a dominant pitcher. I haven't had a chance to look at his numbers. I know his postseason numbers are bad. Um, I was just never a fan.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting. Um, and maybe let's talk about um, Wagner first. Let's
Mm.
just discuss him just for all shits and giggles because I remember bringing him up um, in one of our previous podcasts and I was looking at his stats and if I remember correctly, my argument was going to be to the contrary that he shouldn't be getting in, and I was going to make an argument that he's probably going to. And without looking at his stats right now, I believe his postseason stats, yeah, they're not the best, but I believe his regular season stats were some of the best as far as closers go that we've ever seen. And he's done it kind of quietly on some teams that we normally wouldn't necessarily associate with, great success during that time period. You know, when you think about Billy Wagner in the postseason, if I remember correctly, he's the one who gave up that towering shot by Pujols in the World Series um, when he was playing for Houston. And I
Yeah.
could be wrong. I don't know if that's just revisionist history where I keep thinking that was him who gave it up. Um, but if I remember correctly, his stats say he should be in as far as a closer goes. Now we already know that nobody's Mariano Rivera, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's been a big debate on this channel. Trevor Hoffman, should he be in? That was a whole nother 20-minute discussion. Um, you know, Closers are probably not, unless your last name Eckersley, maybe Lee Smith, depending on what day it is, or Rivera. You're probably not gonna get the accolades to get in. That's just how I feel about it. Did anybody happen to pull up Mr.
So Wagner's career ERA was 2.31, 47 and 40, but he obviously was a closer, so we'd want to look at his saves. He logged, there's the saves, 422 career saves over 16 years.
That's not a little,
Not a little.
Nope.
not a little at all. And he didn't necessarily pitch for some of those more fantastic teams.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have the support of the Yankees lineup when getting those opportunities.
So his last season then was 2010, and that means he became first eligible for Hall of Fame because you first become eligible 5 years after you stop playing, right?
I believe this was his last year on the ballot.
It was his last. Okay,
I believe so.
so that, that's just the same thing happened. Just to be fair, and make sure I don't come across as like a homer or anything like that wants to dump on anyone that's a non-Red Sox or anything like that. But because Jim Rice, the same thing happened where didn't he get in like his final year of eligibility? I want to say,
Close
and
to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
it's like, well, then you can make the argument that he wasn't a Hall of Famer. And I know Greco, you've addressed this before, where you had a sound argument in favor of those that don't get on their first ballot and that takes a little bit of time, but to take that long, it just kind of has this vibe of like, hell, I still have another spot that I can vote for here. I guess I'll vote for him this time.
All right. Let me ask you this. Okay. Let's just put this in perspective. if and again, I'm not even looking this up yet. If you think about somebody not named Billy Wagner, okay, say um, just a random person, maybe they pitched for Boston for a little bit,
Mm.
and they cataloged over 400 saves in their career compared to the rest of the league. Would you consider that person potentially eligible for the Hall of Fame?
Eligible? Um, yeah, I suppose eligible, I suppose.
What's the threshold for saves in a career that would get you in the Hall of Fame?
Well, that's a good question because I was just looking at Wagner's compared to Goose Gossage, who's in the Hall of Fame as well. He only had 310 saves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but he also had years where he pitched over 150 innings,
Okay.
which is what a starter throws right now.
Yeah.
But listen, yeah, different time period, right? And
Yep.
we're gonna come across that with the Sabathia conversation too.
Yep.
So the fact that he didn't pitch as many innings, and actually, I don't know, did Billy Wagner ever pitch 150 innings in a season?
No.
Probably not. Probably his highest is probably 70, right? But that's a time period thing, right?
I pulled up I pulled up the list of most saves of all time.
Yeah.
Billy Wagner is number 8, and guess who he's just ahead of? He's just ahead of a Hall of Famer that I think all of us agree is a definite Hall of Famer, the Eck.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And the Eck didn't reach 400 saves. Granted, he was a starter for good chunks of his career too. So the fact that
Right.
he got to 390 saves even while being a starter for much of his career is pretty impressive.
Yep. Yep.
Well, you were
Who the hell
asking
is
about
John Franco? I see John Franco is on this
oh
list
yeah.
right above
Yeah.
Billy Wagner.
Yeah. Yeah.
You were asking about maybe us being homers, Greco, if we could think of somebody that may have been a Red Sox that may have had a similar number of saves. I just looked up Jeff Reardon,
Oh, Reardon. Yeah.
367 saves. Most innings he pitched in a year was 109.
Okay. What was his ERA for his career?
Let's see. 3.16.
All right. So a whole run more.
What was Wagner's again?
2.31.
Okay, that's a significant difference. Yeah. Yep.
So I guess my question is, does 400 and how many saves? 422?
22, I think he said.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not Hall of Fame worth? If you're the eighth best, like if somebody hit, you know, home runs in their career, if they were in eighth place in home runs, would you say, nah?
Mm-hmm.
I think closer you got to look at too. Um, do they come
Clutch.
in for a one out save or a 3 inning save?
Mm.
Okay. So most people don't come in for a 3 inning save, right?
Right.
A 1 inning save most of the time. That's usually what you see.
Yeah. And probably with him too, maybe a little
I would
longer.
assume so. Yeah, I would assume so. So I guess my thing is that I don't know a lot of you know Billy Wagner's negative positives, right? I'm surprised by how many stats he had. Like I said, when I pulled up his stats before, I was like, I'm gonna make I'm gonna prove that he shouldn't be in. And when I looked at his stats, I was like, no, he should be in. But I also think that that gray area, Rolo, where you were talking about, is somebody who gets in on the 10th ballot really a Hall of Famer? And yeah, I I think they are, right? Because I'll tell you what, if you look at it, how many guys do we think are Hall of Famers that got in on the Veterans Committee?
Yeah. I have to go back and look at that list, but I find that whole process to be slightly dubious.
Well, there's some people, that I know Taylor was pretty happy that they got in recently,
Mm-hmm.
right? Does that make
Yes.
them not Hall of Famers? I think there's a designation that goes along with the fact that they were voted in that way. And I think the same thing happens with somebody who's voted in on their 10th year of eligibility.
Well, Dave Parker got in this year, and I saw Dave Parker play, and um, I believe he's a Hall of Famer. I wouldn't say a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he was a dominant player. There's no question about it. He won. I think he won two straight batting titles. He won an MVP. Um, you know, he was kind of he wasn't as good a right fielder as Dwight Evans was, but he was close. I think he won three Gold Gloves. So, and he was on a World Championship team and all that stuff too. So, and he was good late in his career.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I believe he deserved to get in, and I think the other guy that got in was Dick Allen, who was a slugger. I don't know a ton about him, but I think he hit over 400 home runs, which is a big deal back then.
Yeah, and it should be
Yeah.
realistically. That's a
Um,
pretty significant number.
I saw Yaz hit his 400th home run, and it was a huge thing. Huge thing. He was the first American League player to hit 400 home runs and have 3,000 hits.
Hmm.
Um, so, and then, 2 years ago, my favorite year of the Hall of Fame, one of my favorite players that never got recognition as a player or a manager for that matter, Gil Hodges got in the same year that Big Poppy got in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, I like that. I guess it depends on who you vote in. I think for Billy Wagner's case, maybe he does in terms of like if you compare to other closers, which I mean, what else would you compare him against?
Right.
I just think there's other position players that could have been considered, or maybe even pitchers. I don't know.
Yeah. So I think and we can get into the folks who didn't make it after we I think finished these top three, but I don't necessarily think that he took somebody's place this year, looking at the percentages.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I don't know.
yeah. So we'll have to look at that.
I
But
have some
yeah,
disconcerting news for you, though, Matt. Based on Billy Wagner getting in, guess who else is going to be getting in when he retires? 5 years after he retires, or maybe 15 years after he retires. Craig Kimbrell.
Lemons.
No, Craig Kimbrell.
Oh God.
He already has 440 saves,
Oh.
and his ERA is 2.59.
yeah, yeah. I'll tell you what. I think his career is probably getting close to over.
Mm.
But when he was with the Braves and some of those other playoff teams that he helped, now, yeah, he went to Boston and he wasn't your guy. But I'll tell you what, the dude was dominating when he was with Atlanta. Absolutely dominating. Right or wrong, you may not like the goal wing,
Oh.
whatever it is,
Brutal.
but I'll tell you what. Now, do I
Brutal.
look at him as a Hall of Famer? No. But for him doing what he did, it's interesting. Now, I'll tell you what, this is going to be interesting too. When we talk about closers and the way that the league's been going with closers not being necessarily
Mm-hmm.
as consistent of a position,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where they go and they use the hot hand
Mm-hmm.
when they need it. So your best pitcher may come in the seventh inning, depending on what part of the lineup they're facing now. And it may be arbitrary who your closer is.
Mm-hmm.
So we may be looking at some of these stats as being the peak of what closers get for a
Yeah.
while. And in another 15 years or so, we may be sitting there saying, well, between 2024 and 2034, he had 15 saves a year, and that's amazing because nobody's doing that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, who knows? But yeah, these closer numbers could be dead soon.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's chit chat about Sabathia since we do have a game clock for Mr. Taylor.
Yes, we do.
Uh, now, you folks said that he's borderline.
I need to pull up his stats again. 251 and 161, 3.74 ERA. Now,
Almost 3,600 innings.
Hmm.
Let's see. Well, when I look at his innings, man, 2007 he pitched 241 innings. That's a lot of innings in today's game. 253. And then looks like 253 the next year, 230, 237, 200, 211. And then his final years with the Yankees, he was below 180. But that's a lot of innings.
Mhm.
120 games, only one time, but we don't see a lot of that anymore either.
Nope.
So, I guess, and I was just checking the stats to see if in my mind's eye he's as comparable as I thought he was. And I would say they're kind of in the same. He's in a similar ballpark as Andy Pettitte and Kurt Schilling in win totals, WAR, ERA. There's obviously some variance. Sabathia's got more wins than Schilling does. Schilling's got a better ERA than Sabathia does. And then Pettitte is kind of right in that same mix too. He's a little bit closer to what Sabathia's numbers were, but both Schilling and Pettitte, I feel like certainly have more postseason pedigree than Sabathia does. Sabathia's got some. He obviously won a World Series in
Yeah,
2009.
he's probably more significant postseason than you're giving him credit for. I don't necessarily know if he's Schilling and Pettitte, but he has some pretty significant postseason.
And I guess the only reason why I invoke them in particular is just because, they're not in.
Yeah. So can I make an argument as to why they're not in?
Well, Pettitte, I know he's got the PED stain on him, and then Schilling is just an asshole.
Correct.
So that's going to be held against them.
And honestly, I think those are the only reasons why they're not in.
Yep.
I really do. I think Pettitte alone and Schilling both could get in on their postseason accolades. I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's the reason why they're not in, and I also think that's also the reason why Pettitte's still hanging around on that ballot.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I meant to look and see if he's still
He's
hanging out there. Yeah.
Yeah. He's got to be getting close to his. I don't know when his last year of eligibility is, but he's still teetering around there with A-Rod and those guys. So,
yeah. I mean, Sabathia, you already, I think, told a story on an earlier podcast about him, about how he plunked an opposing team's hitter, right? Even though that meant he was going to lose out on a bonus, right?
$500,000 bonus he lost.
Yeah. So he always seemed like a really good dude, and someone that would be easy to root for too, given that he also, I think, struggled with alcohol for a stretch there, and he was actually open about it and going to get treatment and work on himself and still kind of pitch through it. And I just this isn't to say that I think he shouldn't be in, but just that it's interesting how these elements kind of on the fringes can influence whether he isn't or versus nah.
Well, so one of the things that I think is similar with Sabathia along with Pettitte, and this is a favorable comparison for both of them, is I feel like Sabathia, when he went to the Brewers, had his bloody sock moment where
Yeah.
he was just a workhorse for them.
Yep.
He pitched whenever they gave him the ball, and they overpitched the hell out of him. He was one of the most significant trade pieces that year, and actually gave Milwaukee the opportunity to win. And breathe some life into that franchise.
He even blasted a dinger or two when he went over to the Brewers. Right? He's a good hitter.
Yep.
He so his postseason resume overall, 10-7, 4.28 ERA, 130 innings, looks like 137 hits, 67. I mean, it wasn't dominant like Schilling or Pettis, but like Greco said, but he did win the MVP of the ALCS in 2009.
Mm.
Pitched 16 innings, made 2 starts, and had a 1.13 ERA.
Mm.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he gets in because of his longevity.
Yeah.
I think he gets in because of the history and the stories. But I don't know. For me, I'm okay with him being a first ballot. I would be okay with him being a second too, or
Yeah.
a third,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
But I think he's a Hall of Famer. I think Pettit's a Hall of Famer.
Mhm.
But I also think Bonds is. And I also think McGuire. I think Sosa. I think all those guys are. But I don't think they should get in because they cheated.
Well, where do you stand on Schilling though? Is his asshole quotient so strong that he should be kept out?
I don't think so. I think if you cheat the game, you should be out. I think if you have a personality disorder and people don't like your politics or people don't like you, as long as you haven't raped anybody, killed anybody, molested anybody, done anything like that, then you should be in. I don't care about your personality.
Yeah.
I don't have to hang out with you. I don't have to be your buddy. We're not having children together. I have no idea what the hell you do. Be an asshole. It's fine with me.
I'm glad
It's
you
about
didn't
what he
mention the
accomplished
whole.
on the baseball diamond.
Was that?
It's about what he accomplished in the game of baseball.
Yeah. And
Period.
listen, if he's an asshole like Jeff Kent, I think it's a prick.
Yeah.
But he was probably one of the best second basemen to ever play.
Yeah.
You
I
know
think
what?
he should be in.
Because he's a prick, though, he's not going to get in.
Yeah. I would put him in before I put Billy Wagner in, I'll tell you that.
I agree.
Mm.
I agree with that.
You know, I don't know if I said this, but I've gone on the record before with other people saying I would vote both Clemens and Bonds in. Just because for me, I don't like the fact that they use steroids, but I think for me, there are certain people that use steroids that are not Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people who use steroids that never made it to that level. I agree. Yeah. But they were Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds before they used it.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason why I'd say that they would be able to get it. But they still cheated the game.
But remind me again, you were for Pete Rose being in?
Yeah, because he didn't cheat the game.
Yeah, he did.
I don't think so. Listen, as a player, the man should be in the Hall of Fame. Should he be in the Hall of Fame as a manager? No, he sucked as a manager. And that's when he was gambling. But as a player, he should be in. Joe Torre, as a player, shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, even though he won an MVP award. Joe Torre as a manager, absolutely 100% a Hall of Famer. Terry Francona, player.
Jobber player. Yeah.
As a manager, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. Sandberg, as a player, yes. As a manager, not so much. Right. So I think there's a delineation there. Right. Did Pete Rose cheat the game and change the outcome of it. No. Did
Mm.
did Barry Bonds keep younger players in the minor leagues and change the course of history? Yeah, he did.
Mm.
Did he put pitchers who may have had a longer Major League Baseball career back into the minors in some cases? Sure. Did he affect people's contracts? Yeah, right. Because their ERA jumped because they had to face Barry Bonds, right? That there's affecting the game and the players around you and cheating to do it. That's my difference.
Mm.
Right or wrong, that's my difference. And we already talked about roles. We don't have to go down this road. I know how you feel about it.
I'll tell you though, it was a little jarring to see that little clip of Pete Rose in the Greg Maddux documentary. I had no idea that their careers technically overlapped. That
Yeah.
Pete Rose's like last year where he was a player manager was against like he played against Maddux in like his rookie or like second
Isn't that
year. And I'm
crazy?
like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that nuts?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, quick tip. Don't shower next to Maddox.
Oh God. Yeah.
Don't ruin the surprise for Taylor. He hasn't seen
Oh
it.
no,
Find that one out. Okay.
Um, so, all right. Ichiro.
Yeah. I mean, for me, well, you guys know the automatic rule for me.
Mm-hmm.
You have 3,000 hits, you're in.
Mhm. He should be in twice. Well, he
Yes.
is. He's once in the Japanese Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
and he's in this one. Yep.
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 I think there's 32 or 3 players in the history of the game that have 3,000 hits. Um, and he's one of them. He's the only one I know that had done it in 2 places.
Yeah.
So, I know a lot of people don't think of Craig Biggio as a Hall of Famer because of that, but
I do.
are you one of those, Quinn?
Craig Biggio is in the Hall of Very Good, and he played forever.
He, yeah, that it's 3,000 is just automatic for me.
Mm-hmm.
15 years of 200 hits.
Yeah. That's
Uh,
a
you know, 200 hits. I think there was like 3 or 4 players in the entire major league this year that had 200 hits. So, um, to me, that's an amazing stat.
It's wild to me that he batted 350 in his rookie year, MVP that same year, 56 stolen bases, 242 hits, and yet 8 home runs, which was
all
actually
right.
kind of high for him.
You know what? Like in Rolo, you're not going to antagonize me on this. Number one. All right. Ichiro Suzuki, for the time period that he was in the league, played predominantly for the Mariners.
Mm.
And this is when the Mariners were probably the number 2 team in my division.
Mm.
So it was him. He had, his paths crossed with Edgar Martinez, King Felix at his prime.
Mm.
I mean, they were the pain in the ass for my A's for many a season, and Ichiro was one of them. And when he was playing against my boys, I greatly disliked his stupid little slap swing. But I'll tell you what, I respected it because more than him going and trying to go yard, he stressed out more of my pitchers, made them pitch more. And believe me, for a guy whose favorite player of all time is Ricky Henderson,
Mm.
I know what stressing out a pitcher can do, right? Getting somebody with quick feet on the bases. His
Mm.
defense was ridiculous. And he did more damage slapping singles and beating out singles to second base, right? And earning those singles, not even errors. Like literally slapping a ball to second base and beating the throw to first.
Mm.
he did more damage doing that than he did hitting home runs.
There's no
Because
bigger argument of putting the ball in play than with him.
yeah,
He's he created opportunities just by putting the bat on the ball.
yep, he affected everybody in that lineup behind him
Mm.
because of the pitches that they had to see to try to keep him from scoring because he was always on base. Um,
He could hit more home runs, Quinn. I'm not
yeah,
sure.
yeah, he was known to be one of those guys that during BP would
Right.
put on a show. He would
Mm-hmm.
put on a show, but
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't his game.
Yeah, because Matsui was a big power hitter.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, they were different players.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you think that you look at the approach that like a Mark Teixeira took especially when they started to shift on him, right? Or um, you know, some of those guys who learned how to go the opposite field. Does that make them less of a player? No. I mean, Anthony Rizzo, you know, did more going the opposite field when they were doing those shifts when he was in Chicago, and win and be more impactful in some of those cases than he probably would have been flying out to right field every time. Right. So knowing your game and putting that stress on, and guess what? Have you ever seen anybody else hit like Ichiro in the major league level?
Not that immediately comes to mind now.
Because they don't, because they can't. He did something that nobody else could.
Mm.
I'll say this, he played right field. I always look at the greatest right fielders, um, and this is where you could probably classify me as a honk. Uh, I will never admit openly that there is any better right fielder than Dwight Evans, other than Roberto Clemente. Um, but I think you can make that argument for Ichiro. However, I will not.
Yeah, yeah. When I think about right fielders, I think about those cannon arms.
Well, right, yeah, I was about to say the hose that he had. Oh, jeez.
Clemente, um, Dave Parker,
Yep.
Larry Walker.
Yep.
Um, I mean Guerrero,
Mm.
um, Aramis Ramirez. I don't know if you remember him
Yes.
for Cincinnati. He made a living out of throwing guys out of third. Um, and in Ichiro, I mean, just flat-footed lasers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, he he's one of those guys that went from um, Seattle, which made me hate him, and then he went to New York, which
Mm.
made then he played in Miami, which made me indifferent. But I'll tell you what, he had a hell of a career. And I'm okay with him not getting 100%. I think his accolades say that he should, but um, I think it's still kind of neat that Mariano in his story is still the only 100%er. I think if Jeter didn't get 100%, he should have.
Fair. I, I just really I want whoever. Well, I guess I'm torn on the idea. Part of me wants to hear know who who was it, and for him to explain himself, and if he had a reason, because I think there was a stretch of time there where someone was like a holdout, like, well, if this person isn't getting in, then I'm not voting for anyone unanimously or whatever, like where
Yeah.
it's some stupid shit like that, as opposed to some other argument. Like if he had a like some sort of like rooted in something real kind of argument about Ichiro as to why he doesn't think he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer, okay, like state your case. But otherwise it just feels it just feels like you're almost trying to like instigate, kind of like how I do sometimes. Where I'm just trying to try to get a rise out of you.
It's kind of
And
like the argument, and this happens a lot with the Hall of Fame where, well, Babe Ruth didn't get unanimous election,
mm,
so neither should this guy. And I just think that's stupid.
yeah,
Yeah, and most likely that's probably what it is, right? That one
mhm,
person who sat there and said, "Well, he's getting in no matter what, so I'm going to be that one contrary." So he's not 100%er
Yeah.
that he separates, right? Um, the fact that there's only been one 100%er is amazing to me.
I
Um,
guess I wonder if that has partly to do with the position, the fact that Mariano Rivera is so like clearly and obviously head and shoulders above any other closer, and it feels like, to your point earlier, Greco, where the closer role is kind of shifting, where it doesn't feel like anyone will get even close to his numbers. That that combined with his clutch, amazing postseason, um, you know, uh, um, resume. I wonder if that's what really clinched it for him to be the unanimous one, where it's like, well, in that role, I feel okay about voting him first ballot.
it's funny because if you told me that the first 100% vote would have been a closer, I would have
Mm-hmm.
thought you were crazy because for a while they were actually thought of in the same terms of a DH, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who's primarily a DH, worthy, even Hall of Fame worthy, right? That was one of the thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Where specifically with Edgar, like there was thoughts that he may not even get in just because he was primarily a designated hitter.
Right.
Yeah.
And the same thing for a closer. Is this a real stat? This is something that we've only been covering for so long, and is this a real thing? Um, I almost think
All right,
that
good. I just have
Mariano.
one question for both you guys.
Yes.
How much emphasis for pitchers do you put on whip?
Mm-hmm.
So, um, it's funny because the Hawks, the walks and hits per innings pitched is I think it's a good metric.
Yeah, I do too.
Um, I mean, obviously nothing's perfect, you know. Um, I don't even know. Like they try to measure fielding independent pitching now too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where I don't know how that works. So I like it. I think it tells part of the story. It's another better way to kind of tell a different part of the story. I don't know if it's my end all be all. What do you think, Taylor?
I like it. Um, and I think I wouldn't put it in the same uh, category with like earned run average or like innings pitched over earned run average and stuff like that. But um, if you don't give up a lot of walks or hits, um, it shows that, and it shows how. I think it's a good stat for dominance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also think it's an interesting one when you think about with relations to a reliever as opposed to a guy who
Yeah,
threw you know like a Nolan Ryan. I would imagine his whip is probably higher than any reliever because he probably saw the guys 3 or 4 times a game,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
right? So, but yeah, no, I think it's certainly an interesting metric. I like it.
It's definitely
Brolo.
one of those. It's one of those stats that I accept. Not one of those. Not one of those stats that make me want to slap a nerd in the face.
Yes, I would agree, Quinn.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Breslow, relax. Um, all right. So we done with Ichiro. We happy with him?
I think so. I think
All
so.
right. So let's.
Um, so before I was going to cut off, but
Okay.
so should I So next week, are we going to talk about Maddox?
Yeah, let's talk about Maddox next. Well, so we probably won't meet next week.
Mhm.
Okay.
The week after, let's chit chat about Maddox.
Yeah.
All right.
Does that work, Mr. Taylor?
Thank
Bringing
you.
in the lefty.
Make sure it's Sabathia.
Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah. Thanks, brother. Have a good
All
night.
right.
Yeah.
Feel better.
Good night, kids.
All right, Rollo. Just the two of us. So, did you want to touch on the guys who didn't get in?
Yeah, yeah. I'm interested since I have the list pulled up here of who the um of who the vote getters were on this list here. I do see two topics of discussion that we've had in recent podcasts with Beltran and Andrew Jones. Um, it's interesting. Was this Beltran's first year on the ballot, or has he
Um,
been on for a while?
I want to say he was on before.
Okay, let me actually pull up when his last year was, because I'm interested to see like what the trend is too, because you see some guys who just really tail off, and then some guys who just keep ticking up, and you see that they're on that trend to probably get there. Let's see, Beltran's last season play. Oh, this is yeah, his last season playing for Houston was 2017.
Yeah,
So that means 2022 would have been his first year
I
eligible.
believe so. Yeah.
So yeah, this is only his then what his third year on the ballot.
Yep, I think so. I mean that would make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And when you consider, so because of all that mess, and actually, let's see if this works, Rollo.
Mm.
Let's see. Here we go. Um, I think part of the fact that he was so entrenched in that 2017 trash throws scandal,
Mm-hmm.
he actually lost his job to coach the Mets. He was going to be the next manager of the Mets,
Mm-hmm.
um, and because of that, he actually lost his gig.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on him?
I remember him being a real hot commodity in it was either 0304 when he got traded from the Royals to the Astros, right? In like their postseason push, where yeah, I think it was '04 because I think it was Astros Cardinals in the '04 NLCS,
Yeah,
and then ended up being the Cardinals that the Sox beat. But
with Billy
uh,
Wagner.
yes, uh, and um, the play I do have at least a play that really sticks out for me with Beltran of an amazing catch that he made running up that weird mound
Oh
in
yeah,
center field.
Talos Hill. Yeah,
Yeah, in Houston. So he was really good outfielder and solid hitter. I kind of considered him to be kind of he always seemed like a more likable Jacoby Ellsbury. Uh, a little better Jacoby Ellsbury, a little more durable. Is just what my not super supported by stats right here. I got to pull up what his stat line is, but um, uh, that's what initially kind of jumps to my mind when I think of Carlos Beltran. But I will say he does teeter onto that line of like Hall of Very Good.
mm.
Where I don't know if I think of him and I think, oh yeah, sure, like he definitely not a slam dunker. Like he's not someone I would consider a slam dunk. And when I look now at his stats,
hmm
435 home runs, 279 average, 70.1 WAR.
How many hits?
He had 2,725 hits.
So just missed that magic threshold.
The magic threshold, yes. So, for me, he would he would be one of those that's like just under, as far as I'm
Okay.
concerned. So I actually think where he is on this ballot is about right. but what
Okay.
but I guess it's more of a voter phenomenon than it's something that I should really hold against the player themselves. But it's this like, you know, if he wasn't initially, why does he all of a sudden become a Hall of Famer, several years down the line? So I guess it will be interesting to see if he does continue on this track up and he gets in the next few years or so, or if he starts to trail off.
But it's funny because I think usually once guys hit a certain threshold, they're pretty much in. Like
Yeah.
Andrew Jones, he's probably going to get in.
Yep.
Chase Utley's, man, maybe not,
Mm.
right? But once you get to a certain threshold, it seems like you're almost a slam dunk. Um, I think Beltran um, was one of the better switch hitters
Mm.
that we've
Oh, I
seen
forgot
play.
about the switch hitting element to him. That's also a
Yeah.
big point in his favor. Yeah.
Um, I think, you know, I look at him as at his prime being one of the most dominant players
Mm.
in the league.
Mm.
And he wasn't dominant because he did one thing great.
Mm.
He was one of those few guys that was dominant because he did everything great.
Mm.
And I look at the next guy on the list as being one of those guys too. Andrew Jones was probably one of the most exciting center fielders at a very young age that I think we've been able to see for a very long time. Um, and I look at both of them as being one of those guys who, you know, um, had they had a longer peak,
Mm.
specifically Andrew Jones,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think there's a question. And honestly, I think they're both Hall of Famers. From what I watched of their career, um, they're both in.
Andrew Jones, though, he's one of the it's interesting to me how the mind's eye, like, experiential um vibe of a player can cut both ways. There are some players who benefit from that, where you're just kind of like, oh, but you had to see them play, and they were amazing, and that seems that elevates them in your mind. And then there are some guys where it's just kind of like, like the San Diego effect. Like, yeah, sure, Trevor Hoffman has a million saves and all that good, but he's fucking San Diego, like irrelevant. Come on, that's just kind of the vibe. But um, Andrew Jones, I feel like you picture about like I picture those amazing catches where he's just like completely laid out, and I pictured that like the big swings that he had. Like, am I correct in remembering that he had a big
Yeah,
a
yeah,
big
he didn't get
stride,
cheated.
right?
Yeah, yeah, he wasn't cheated.
Uh, and I felt like he was one of the best players on really good Braves teams there for a stretch of time. But then when I look at his numbers, I'm like, oh, they're actually not as good
Yeah,
as
no, yeah,
yeah.
he's you talk about the eyeball test.
Uh-huh.
He's the eyeball test.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
one of those guys that it was an experience watching him play,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't for an extended period of time.
Mm-hmm.
He was it took a toll on his body,
Mm-hmm.
all those things that he used to do up there. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, talk to Glavin, talk to Maddox, talk to Schmaltz and Chipper, and ask them about when they knew ball was getting hit to center field, what was
Mm.
going to happen,
Yep. They knew.
right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where um, you know if you didn't have all the context and you weren't able to watch him.
Mm.
Taylor said something about Parker. I was able to see him,
Mm.
right? And we may not look at his stats and say, "Oh yeah,
Mm.
he's a Hall of Famer."
Yeah,
Right?
Dave Parker. I can't even picture him. I have to look him up right now.
Pirates. Remember those ugly ass '70s hats?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I see.
Yeah,
Yeah, with the yellow stripes on them. Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Well,
The old painter's
he,
caps.
he was pretty close. He was certainly way closer than
Mr. Jones.
yeah.
Yeah,
Has almost 1,000 more hits than Andrew Jones. Fewer home runs though. That's the thing about Andrew Jones, and I guess that speaks to him not getting cheated. The fact that he had less than 2,000 hits, but 434 of them were dingers. It's
yeah,
like, whoa.
yeah. Without that stat, I don't think he gets considered.
Yeah. And I think that would you agree that um he may be one of those that the offense obviously almost always rules the day for these sort of Hall of Fame decisions, but the defense definitely gets factored in as a pretty significant kind of component to his game, or what made him stand out in the eyeball test.
I agree. I agree. Absolutely. And it should. Um, he played some pretty impactful defense
Mm.
for some pretty incredible teams,
Yeah.
right? In a premium spot. So catchers, shortstop, center fielders
Hmm.
could probably get grace um, if they play premium defense as
Mm.
far as their offensive numbers go. You um, excuse me. Ozzie Smith is not a Hall of Famer if you look at his offensive stats.
No, he's the one that I think always immediately comes to mind as someone who, uh, I mean, he wasn't his nickname the Wizard of Baseball or something like that, right?
Yeah, the Wizard. Yeah,
Yeah. So that's all his defense, and he also didn't he also wow the crowd by doing a backflip into shortstop whenever he
oh
would
yeah,
take the field.
yeah, yeah.
And he's someone who I didn't personally like. I wasn't watching him day to day. Like I wasn't old enough yet to really observe him in that way. But he's one of those like legendary guys that you learn about when you learn about the game, basically. And so if that's all on the heels of your defense, then yeah, that I think stands out enough to warrant a Hall of Fame.
Right. Well, now, did you ever see the highlight when he was a rookie with San Diego and the
Oh,
diving play he made going towards the hole?
hmm.
You haven't seen that?
I don't think so.
Right. That may be worth a little search here.
I'm glad he got out of that irrelevant
I was waiting
hellhole
for that. Yeah.
and he got into a actual baseball town in St. Louis for the rest of his career. Hey, if this here podcast ever really hits it big, I have a feeling I'm going to start getting some hate mail from down in San Diego.
Oh, buddy, I hope. I hope. All right, can you see this?
Yes.
So this is 1978. There is no audio.
Whoa.
So that ball,
What's like above him? Like he had to like as he was diving, he like snatched it up here.
it like, oh, we got an ad. Um, it basically, as he was mid dive, it changed course and went above his head, which was pretty damn amazing.
Damn.
Yeah,
Yeah, I gotta see this again.
you see. So, yeah. Let me see if I can inch it. So you see it where it is now, right?
Yep.
Starts his dive. Now look where he's going with his dive. Hold on, I gotta move this because I can't see it. So see where he's going with his dive already? It's already going behind him now.
Yep.
It's shooting this way. So he's already getting his hands up to catch it with his bare hand as he's diving. So it goes behind him, catches it with his bare hand, and makes the play.
That's insane.
There we go. Behind him. Amazing.
That's ridiculous.
Amazing. Right?
That's
Yeah.
that's something else. Like it looks the kinesthetic intelligence is like on genius level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which it's always whenever people have a very narrow kind of understanding or definition sometimes of what intelligence means, but I just think that there's this whole other people who are professional athletes are kinesthetically incredibly intelligent and guys like Ozzie Smith were freaking geniuses.
The ability to change course in the amount of time it takes for you to leave your feet and barehand a ball because it changed trajectory on you is amazing.
How many freaking you know what I was about to say? How many ligaments would I tear trying to do that? I like I would just probably die. I would probably just attempt to do that, and I would just explode on the mound or explode on the field, and just no longer be able to play the game or talk about the game because I'd be dead.
Dude was a beast. Dude was a
That's
beast.
amazing.
So the value of defense in the end is huge. And I think that this next guy actually I put in the same kind of category as a guy who's now off the ballot,
Mm.
Mr. Kinsler and Mr. Utley. I feel like they were kind of on similar kind of trajectories. One in the American League, one in the National.
Well, because Utley, yeah, okay. So Utley, Pedroia, and Kinsler, I sort of feel like we're all kind of neck and neck. Utley was a little ahead of the other two guys in terms of like when he started, but those were the kind of like three. Oh, and Cano. I feel like Cano was the other sort of second baseman that
Yeah.
was kind of making noise right around the same era. And Utley was one of those guys that always seemed like a gritty player,
Mm-hmm.
and um, kind of seemed to match the grittiness that it feels inherent with Philadelphia teams.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
um, and he seemed like a steady offensive player, kind of like a little bit like Roland, I would say, in
Scott
just kind of
Rowland.
like Scott Roland in terms of like how consistent he was, but similar to Roland. I mean, I guess Roland is in the Hall of Fame now, right? I, I, he
Yeah,
would be in the Hall. He would be in the Hall of Very Good for me.
yeah.
Utley would also be in the Hall of. Uh, Roland's in the Hall of Very Good. Utley's in the Hall of Pretty Good. I would say that.
I like it. I like it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, see, Roland, um, Roland, I think, has some of the stats, and we already argued him
Mm-hmm.
way back. Utley's one of those guys that I think gets the nod because of his 2008 Phillies because of his second life with the Dodgers. Um,
Mm.
and again, he's a second baseman. If he's a third baseman with these stats, probably not having this conversation, right? Um, and I think that goes for any of these guys.
Mm.
Um, Now, another guy I throw in here that time period with those second basemen
Mm.
is like a Dan Uggla,
Oh yes, yep, yep.
right? Who was and I think about the NL East, and I think about Utley, I think about Uggla with the Braves in that time period when I mean you thought, and actually he was with
He was the Marlins,
the
right?
Marlins first,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and then he went to the Braves, and and he had, I mean, he fell off because of the strikeouts. I mean, my man turned into Javier Baez um, when he went to Detroit, when he ended up, towards the latter half of his Braves career. But I mean, they all had the slugging second baseman
Mm.
during that time period. It was kind of like a heyday, and Utley was on one of the higher tiers of that group.
It's interesting how that kind of shifted from shortstop over to second base because shortstop there was Nomar and A-Rod and Jeter and Tejada, and that just kind of just kind of shifted over to second baseman. There being that kind of class that was all pretty good, um, and um, Ugla. Am I remembering correctly though that he was a bit of a butcher in the outfield though? I mean the infield,
Yeah, well, it almost seemed like he ended up with not quite the yips,
but
but he had
something
he had a
close to
bit
it.
of
Yeah.
he had a bit of knob block in him
Mm.
towards, towards the end for whatever the mental capacity to play this game
Mm.
escapes nobody, and it affects everyone. So um, it just happens for no reason whatsoever. All of a sudden, you just can't do something you used to do. Um, just doesn't work. So I think he falls into that category a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so Utley, um, and now we get to the interesting ones. Three in a row here,
Yeah.
and I know you have certain feelings about at least two of them.
I mean, it's really looking like with those numbers, none of them are getting in. Um, but I really think all three of them should get in. A Rod is kind of in Barry Bonds territory where like the numbers are just absolutely undeniable. And he was one of the greats even before. You suspect maybe steroids were getting into the mix or PEDs were getting into the mix. Um,
Well, he admitted, and he was caught and suspended for a full year.
True. So A Rod is a little different than some of these other people are who may have just fallen into like strongly suspected or like um after the fact ended up on like lists like like the Mitchell report, right? Uh but um A Rod, you're right, he was outright suspended, and I guess he shares that in Manny, and that Manny also he wasn't he Manny was suspended for a whole year. It was half a season with him,
Right,
right?
right,
Yeah.
because A Rod got caught twice.
Right. 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 So I mean, you don't have to tell me you don't have to urge me too hard to, take shots at A-Rod because I do think he's a bit of a preening phony plastic banana. But he's I'm trying to be kind of fair and acknowledge that his talent was exceptional, and you can't really tell the story of Major League Baseball without having a segment of it devoted to Alex Rodriguez. and him coming up on that stacked freaking loaded Mariners team, and then the like record-setting contracts that he got with Texas, and then the Yankees, and the whole drama there with how he was basically a Boston Red Sox, and then the league said nope and swatted him away, which maybe that ended up changing the course of history. I mean, it did, but like, what if would we have won with him on our team instead of the way it ended up turning out?
So let me ask you this, right? Because you and Taylor have both been critical of Nomar.
Mm.
You had A-Rod at shortstop from the beginning of that season, and maybe traded away Nomar, and maybe not got Cabrera. Maybe you went out and got a I don't know. Let's just have fun with it. An Andrew Jones for a Nomar. Would that have changed the course of the Red Sox?
Yeah, I mean,
actually, hold on.
Yeah,
not an Andrew Jones. Let's actually go with something that could have been potential. A Beltran, because Beltran was actually on the trade block that year. He didn't get traded until the next year.
Mm-hmm.
But oh no, he got traded that year.
Yeah, it was 04. It was 04. Yeah.
So,
well, Beltran would have been all for, especially at that time. One thing that I think was important to note about OCAB was that he seemed like he was obviously really good defensively, and he was serviceable offensively, and but he just seemed to blend in with the clubhouse vibe well, and kind of added a positive energy to the clubhouse, which I think was important and was one of the detrimental elements to Nomar, was just the kind of dark cloud that was hanging over him. And
yeah, I heard all about it.
Yeah, well,
so A-Rod would have been that same dark cloud.
So I do wonder what effect he would have had on the clubhouse, because it wasn't coming together for the first half of the season. The first half of the season, we were like a 500 team. And I remember there was a lot of like, what the hell is going on here? Like, we have more talent than what this record indicates. And it wasn't until we kind of got into that little scuffle with the Yankees midseason, and then Theo pulled off that trade, that we then kicked it into gear and actually started playing to the potential that people saw in us that season, and we won it all. And I just don't know that. I don't know that A-Rod's kind of status at that time would have necessarily helped matters, because he was also, he was a superstar, and he did not necessarily seem like a benevolent superstar. At least that's not the vibe I've gotten from him.
So let me just say this. I hate A-Rod. I never liked the guy. I think he was a cancer to the game. I think that he was that. Oh, sorry. I think that he, was a player that in the end ended up being for himself. I don't necessarily know if 2004 he was quite as bad as how he ended up in his career. I think some of it was his relationship with Jeter.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of it was his giving up a shortstop to play third base. And I also think that the criticism that he received for going to the Yankees, that may not have been the case had he just gone to end up in Boston, which wasn't his choice.
True.
For him to not go to Boston.
True.
I'm curious. Obviously revisionist history, we have no idea how it would have panned out. But I'm just curious. Statistically, having him at shortstop and potential for 30 to 40 home runs every year, and then also adding a Beltran for a few years. Um, in light of, you would have lost your years of Manny,
Right.
but you would have had the defense that Manny didn't provide,
Right.
and probably similar production.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe not as
Last time of
significant,
Beltran's career. Yeah.
but similar production.
Yeah. It's a very interesting sliding doors moment. And you're right that those factors on the Yankees moving to third instead of staying at short and uh may have contributed to his, um the sort of negative vibe that he seemed to develop as he was on the Yankees. But um he, aside from his play in the 2009 World Series, which was good. Like, not only did he win it that year, but as I recall, I think he played well after
Mhm.
years and years
Yeah,
of,
no, that was his like resurgence as a
yeah.
playoff. But yeah,
Prior to that, though, he was like kind of considered the Peyton Manning of of baseball, where he would put up these gaudy numbers in the regular season and then just kind of shrink in the postseason. And
and then ended up winning 2 Super Bowls.
yeah, fair, but let's remember that the defense completely carried Peyton Manning in that second Super Bowl that he won.
Okay,
Oh yeah.
yeah. So all right, so um, I think it's interesting, um, because A Rod is one of those guys that gets an immediately disqualified
Mhm.
to me.
Yeah.
Um, the fact that now, if you notice, the folks who are not on this ballot anymore are Bonds,
Right.
Collins,
Hmm.
McGuire, um, Palmero. They drop off. He drops off.
Hmm.
Um, I think the same with Manny.
Yeah.
I think the same with Pettit.
Yeah. That's definitely the direction they're going in. It.
Yeah. Do you feel more strongly about Manny being in than A Rod?
I mean, for purely biased reasons, right?
Well, that's why I asked. Otherwise, I wouldn't even have asked.
For purely biased reasons, just because I watched them all the time, and I swear there was, uh, um, I've never seen a prettier right-handed swing
Mm-hmm.
than Manny Ramirez. And for as much of a goofball as he was, and kind of not a great guy, you hear a lot of the kind of behind-the-scenes stuff with him. He, you know, and he didn't always seem to maybe take the game as seriously as you would have liked. Um, when you saw him in the batter's box, though, he like just the thing that always stood out. My dad pointed it out a long time ago that he never fouled the ball off of himself. He he never got so off balance that he had a bad swing and he clanked it off his knee or his foot or whatever. If he ever fouled it, it would usually be kind of off to the side into the stands or like straight back.
Yep.
And typically when that would happen, you would hear him say, "Oh no!" You would always hear because he knew that he missed one.
He just missed it. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because obviously without the cloud of PED
Mm-hmm.
and probably not the amazingly gaudy numbers. Um, or I shouldn't say that because I don't know if Ramirez necessarily had gaudy numbers, but without the the sexy numbers that Ramirez put up,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think about pure hitters and a guy who we're going to see in the ballot,
Mm-hmm.
um, in 5 years is a Joey Votto.
Mm-hmm.
I think about the bat control, similar to what Ramirez had, like you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Votto didn't fly out to the infield for over 1,000 games.
Jeez. Oh yeah, that's right. I remember mentioning that.
How
Yeah.
does that happen? That's amazing, right? So, um, I think Manny was an incredibly skilled hitter.
Mm-hmm.
I think um, I like the character that Manny was. I think that endeared him to a lot of fans. I also think that his personal life is whatever it was.
Yeah.
Um, not gonna lie, when he had a stint with Oakland, I was pretty stoked to have him for a little bit,
Yeah.
which seemed to be the theme. I mean, we started with Frank Thomas, who wasn't necessarily at the end of his career, but had a few good years with us towards
Mm-hmm.
the end. The Mike Piazzas, Garcia Parra
Yep.
joined us for a bit. In Manny,
Yeah.
with what one last hurrah. Even Giambi coming back to my boys for a year
That's right. Yeah.
was fun. But yeah, I mean he's not there. He's not there. Now, the next guy you probably haven't seen a lot of,
Mm.
but his career, and we're actually going to be talking about him coming up because he was actually when we continue the Cy Young vote, his Cy Young award was one of the most I don't want to say controversial, but one of the more discussed.
Mm-hmm.
So
His
King Felix,
11-11 or like 12-11 season or something like
yeah,
that, right?
yeah. What are your thoughts on King Felix?
King Felix, uh, interestingly enough, huh?
Not a lot of thoughts on him, huh? Because he played on the West Coast.
So, uh, Felix, definitely an ace and one of the dominant pitchers during that stretch of time in the 2010s, really. I was just going back to make sure, yeah, basically getting into the 2010s was when he was really hitting his stride and being like, I don't want to face King Felix. And he is one of those guys that looks like his career, it seemed like he was hitting that threshold in the 2010s where you're like, well, if he keeps this up, he's a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks like it it kind of petered out a little,
It did.
a little more quickly or suddenly than I had initially realized. Because in my mind's eye, I'm just like, oh yeah, he was dominant. Like, yeah, he probably should be a Hall of Famer. But then I look at his numbers and I'm like, oh, what happened? Because they're
If
not as high as I would have expected, at least in the positive numbers.
if I remember correctly, and I'm not looking at his stats, you have him up,
Mm.
but he was kind of that workhorse
Mm-hmm.
kind of pitcher where I feel he was kind of a cautionary tale in why we see a lot more conservative innings pitched for some of these newer, younger players because he came in,
Mm.
pretty young, um, and kind of harken back to that old school high strikeout,
Mm.
Clemens kind of style power pitcher,
Mm.
and then it just hit him. And
Yeah.
the miles caught up, and he didn't have that anymore.
Well,
Yep.
you're right. Yeah, because I remember him being particularly young when he came up. He was 19 in his rookie season, and in his rookie season, he pitched 84. He pitched 84 innings, but then he doubled that in his next season. He was at 191 and then 190, 200, 238, 249. And he was over 200 all the way through 2015, 2016, 153. And then he must have been injured in 2017. And then he kind of petered off at that point. He opted not to play in 2020 because of COVID,
Right.
and he just hasn't come back. I don't know if that's his decision or if it's
A lot of guys did
baseball's
that.
decision.
Yeah,
But
I don't know what his thing was, but um, a lot of guys did that.
he won the Cy Young in 2010. In that and I guess we'll talk more about this when we go through that year. But he led in innings pitched, games started, and ERA. He had the highest WAR of all pitchers at 7.2. But yeah, his win loss was 13-12. And
It was ridiculous.
13
Yeah,
and 12. What the hell?
he literally would get either 0 run support
Uh-huh.
or 1 run. And
Yeah.
and I watched, I think, at least 6 or 7 of his games.
Mm.
And he was filthy. Just filthy.
Yeah.
And he was a dominant pitcher.
Mm. So
Now,
it'll be interesting though to see because if his last season was so this must be his second year on the ballot because the last year he played was 2019.
yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see if he just like I don't know like where his numbers go. I guess he'll probably trend downward because at the end of the day, it just seemed like his career wasn't quite long enough. I think. Or
Yeah,
his
I,
peak
I, I
wasn't
think
long enough.
yeah, I think that's his. I think that's um his probably like least impressive part of
Mm.
his resume. But I think is interesting because um and I don't know, but I think that's pretty high to start on the ballot. I
Mm.
think generally people around this threshold when they're early in the ballot tend to see an increase. They don't always make it,
Mm.
but they tend to see an increase. So I'm curious to see where that goes.
Yeah.
So um Abreu and Rollins, 2 Phillies.
Two
What do you
Phillies.
think?
Bobby Abreu, what stands out for him is just the home run derby seemed to break him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which he's not alone.
Mm.
There's been several guys who have lit it up in the beginning of the season, and then go into the home run derby and it just messes your swing up.
Yep.
So, um, Rollins and Abreu, what are your thoughts?
Rollins is one of those guys, maybe because he won an MVP one year, right?
Mm-hmm.
That stands out to me as being someone who should be higher, like more highly regarded than he is. But now I have to pull up his stats to actually see why he's not.
Well, I think he's the shortstop effect.
Say that again. He's the
The,
shortstop.
the
What?
the shortstop effect. I think that helps him.
Um, I mean, 2,455 hits. That's pretty good.
Hmm?
264 average. I guess you'd probably want to see a little better average.
For that time period and that style of play, yeah.
Mm. But his MVP year was 2007. 20 triples. Yeesh. He led in a lot of categories that year, hence why he won. 162 games played. That's the thing too, is that he played like he was always out there.
As a shortstop.
Right, which is, as you know all too well, is a lot more wear and tear than most any other position. Would you put any other position close to shortstop
Oh,
in baseball?
oh yeah. Hands down, catcher
Oh, for sure.
is the most ridiculous position to try to stay healthy. I would
Sure.
say catcher, pitcher, short, third, center, second, first, right, left.
Hmm. So you would,
Left is the penthouse. You just kind
yeah,
of
which is why Manny was out there. Like,
yeah,
don't work too hard, Manny.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you would put pitcher above shortstop, given how babied pitchers can be sometimes.
I will tell you that and I might be facing it again soon.
Mm.
Um, but you'll see more pitchers go under the knife
Mm,
to get surgeries on their elbows and their shoulders more than you will see any other position.
mm,
The amount of wear and tear that goes on their one body part
yeah.
is unmatched. Now, the other position you're going to see a lot more um, arm surgeries on is shortstop. And I think I may actually have to go in soon um, because I am junk at the moment.
You've been
But
mentioning that possibility a few
yeah,
times now. Yeah,
it's starting to get worse, and I'm not even throwing. So
that's not good.
no, we'll see what happens. But but
Rollins
you
is
know,
one of those guys though that does, again, deferring to my mind's eye, as fallible as it may be, he stands out as more of a. I would think he'd be considered higher as like being more in the running for being a Hall of Famer than someone like Bobby Abreu. Like
I agree.
Abreu, because Abreu was someone who I feel like flashed quickly with the Phillies, and he seemed to do so at an opportune time where he then got that contract with the Yankees, and then he just kind of petered and sort of just never quite rose up to what I thought people thought he should have been, I guess.
Yeah, I think of Abreu. If I had to compare him to a current player,
Mm.
um, I would look at him as a oh geez, why am I drawing a blank? He's actually he led off for the Phillies last year. He was with the Cubs. Schwarber, Kyle Schwarber,
Oh yes, yes, yes.
where
Okay, yeah.
where he's a consistently strong bat. He's probably not going to hit you 50 home runs. He's a tough out. He may be a liability in the field in some cases,
Mm.
but he's a consistently strong bat.
Mm.
Abreu had some pretty good years with Philly, with Houston, I believe too, um, and was a pretty strong player. I don't think he gets in the Hall of Fame.
It's wild though. Abreu's numbers are better than Rollins pretty much across the board.
Yeah, well, he was a different hitter, right?
Yeah.
And Rollins, I don't think Rollins necessarily is in this conversation,
Mhm.
aside from his hits, if he wasn't a shortstop.
Right.
What was Abreu's hits?
Abreu's hits 2470.
Okay, so 300 less than Rollins.
2470. No, he had 15. He had 15 more hits than Rollins.
Oh, well, why did I think you said 2,700? Okay, so yeah, so he had more hits than Rollins.
Yeah.
Okay,
More hits,
um,
more dingers. Although Rollins kind of isn't that far behind considering he's a shortstop, but also the average. Uh, Abreu's almost 30 points higher in average. He had
Abreu was a
fewer.
hitter.
What was that?
Abreu was a hitter.
Yeah, but Rollins just stood out to me more. I guess it's the shortstop effect, like you said.
It is, baby. You know, us shorties were sexy.
uh, um, and maybe also what's held against Abreu in my mind is that he wasn't on that World Series team. He had already left. He was on the Yankees at that point.
Yep.
Whereas Rollins obviously played an integral role in that World
Yes, he did.
Series team.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Him, Howard,
Oh yeah.
Utley,
Cole
I mean,
Hamels, right? He was on that team.
Hamels, Cliff Lee.
Yeah.
Um,
Was Oswalt on that team?
he might have been.
Mm.
He might have been. He was another guy that I really liked.
Yeah. He was a little.
Oswalt was in that Tim Hudson category for me.
Was he?
Solid ground ball pitcher. pitched every game. You were in every game.
Wow, he was 6 feet tall. Oswald, I always pictured him as being a tiny little like
Uh,
firecracker of a fastballer.
uh, Skinny guy too.
Huh. And no, so Oswald was not. He was on Houston. He got traded to the Phillies in 2010, and he was
Okay,
on
so he was after.
11. So yeah, so he was
Yeah, I
after.
wasn't sure about that.
Mm.
Yep. All right, the Scal.
Well, we were talking about Ozzie Smith earlier. Omar Vizquel is one of those guys that is, his biggest claim to fame as to why he's really getting consideration is his defense. Am I right about that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the guy played shortstop until he was like in his
500 years old.
yeah. I'm pretty sure, and I don't remember for some reason, but I think he's got some off the field things that are probably gonna keep him out.
That's what I was wondering about, like kind of like domestic violence sort of stuff, if I'm
I
not
think so.
mistaken.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, he was close to 3,000 hits,
Mm.
if I remember correctly. Obviously,
Two,
was never. What's that?
2,877 hits.
Okay. Yeah. But he pitched forever.
Mm.
I'm pitched. He played
Mm.
forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think he's got to be almost done on the ballot. I think he's probably got a year or two left. I don't think he's getting on. Um, but he was he played on some pretty like impactful playoff teams.
I mean, all those Cleveland teams. Yikes.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think he at least won 10 Gold Gloves.
11. Good, good,
11.
good, good
Okay.
guess. Yeah.
I think he was just one of those guys where you could just roll him out there. I don't know. Hold on. Instead of making you do it, I'm gonna look. All right.
23 seasons, I think.
23 seasons, and he played in what? How many games a year? I want to say he pretty much went. So 143, 142, 136, 158, 69. He was hurt for a year. 136, 152, 51, 51, 144. I mean, he played in a lot of games at a premium position that did a
Mm-hmm.
lot of work in your body.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of plug and play. So that alone, I think there's value in him. Um, again, it's hard for me to make the argument for him to get in because I think of some of his personal life got in the way. Um, but I'll tell you what, if defense meant more,
Mm.
he probably already would have been in a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially especially for his contributions on that Cleveland team.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And then you got Dusty Two Sacks right underneath him.
I like Pedroia.
Another guy whose injuries unfortunately cut short the trajectory that he was on. Where if he had kept stringing together, he would have been a close call. He would have been an interesting one at the end of the day if he had had a full career. If he had slotted into that Hall of Very Good class as opposed to Hall of Fame. Um, but we'll always have '06 and '07, or '07 and '08, '07 and '08, because he was Rookie of the Year and then MVP the next year.
He was probably one of my favorite um, players for that era.
Mm-hmm.
I just liked his grit.
Well, am I wrong in saying that he may, like, in some ways seem to have one of the more unorthodox um, swings this side of Vladimir Guerrero. Like just some of the balls, like in the sense, not that the swing was super quirky, but the balls that he would reach to like actually make solid contact on, you just be like, oh, don't swing at that, and then you would like crush it, and it's like, what the hell? How
My
did he do that?
my
Like
man,
that
my
ball was
man.
at his eye level or whatever.
Yeah, he did have a quirky swing,
Mm,
and that allowed him to kind of stretch out the strike zone a little bit.
mm-hmm.
Um, and he was effective doing it. My man was a beast. He was a beast. Um, Burley,
Loved watching him pitch because he was quick. He just got the ball and threw.
2 hour game,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, 2 hour game. Um, yeah, he was one of those dudes that I think had he done more in Miami
Mm,
when they did that big free agent push
mm-hmm.
with him, Reyes, that would have been a little bit, we'd be singing a different tune
Mm-hmm.
about him.
Agreed.
Because he was consistent. He had the longevity. Um, he was a good dude.
214 wins. That's pretty good. 381 ERA though. That's definitely a little on the high side to be
Yeah.
considered into the hall.
Yeah. Well, I think he also um, was affected by the beginning of his career being kind of in the height of the steroid.
Yeah.
Um, that when it was all accepted in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, because he certainly pitched better in the latter stages.
I
Um,
think being able to, and it's something that I think not enough pitchers and maybe they're certainly getting, maybe they're realizing this now there's a pitch clock, but he seemed to grasp the the idea of like controlling the game with pace.
yes,
And
rhythm was huge for him.
yeah, yeah. And we're like, don't let the batters get comfortable and throw you off with stepping out a million times. And like you force the issue. And it kind of similar, after watching the documentary, kind of similar to the way Maddox seemed to just really control it and just get the ball and pitch. And of course, you need to couple that with being really talented. And obviously, Burley wasn't as talented as Maddox, but but I think he had the right idea there with just trying to pace it in a way that was more commanding.
Yeah, he controlled the game,
Mm-hmm.
and I think he probably wouldn't be as much of a unicorn in today's game
Mm.
with the pitch clock, right? But
Right. Yep.
but rushing the hitters to get there through their little routine
Mm.
in order to keep pitching at the pace he was definitely was an advantage that he took advantage of. Um, for him. Um, Frankie Rodriguez. I don't have a lot.
Okay, Rod. Mm.
I don't have a lot. Just he was one of those guys who had a few years of dominance. Um, maybe a little bias on my end because of who he pitched for, but
Sure.
you know, um, David Wright and Torrey Hunter. I mean, talk about guys you would have assumed would have been Hall of Famers while you watched them play. David Wright, career cut short because of concussion. Torrey Hunter, I when I was watching him, I consider him a potential Hall of Famer. In retrospect,
Mm.
I don't know if he's there.
Corey Hunter, I mean, he had a long career. He played for, it says 19 seasons. It was really more like 18 seasons, I guess. But He 353 dingers. 2,452 hits.
Yeah. Pretty significant elite defense in center.
Yes. Forever. He worked the baggy better than anyone I've ever seen out in the Metro dump. Just
Yeah,
being able to use, and actually I still remember him playing when the Twins came to Fenway. He injured his ankle, I think, because of maybe a what he was too used to with the stupid baggy center field wall, when he would just kind of, probably
just
plant his
run
foot
into
on
it.
that to, like, spring on it to, make a catch. He was, I'm sure, accustomed to that. And so when he went to go do a similar thing in the Fenway wall, his cleat got stuck in the wall and it like twisted, it like mangled his ankle up. And I just wonder, and I know he eventually went to Detroit, right? And oh yeah, that's right,
Anaheim.
Angels. Yeah. He Minnesota is kind of like the San Diego of the Midwest. Like, get the hell out of my face, Minnesota, with your teams that are always pretty good and then they don't do anything. That's been my experience of them for basically, my whole baseball watching life. Um, and it's just a shame. He seemed like a really good dude, solid player. Like, just always seemed to be there. Like, he aside from that one anecdote there of him obviously getting injured, and I'm sure he missed games after that, but he just seemed to always be making plays in the outfield.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, he was one of those guys who, um, despite them not being to the level that you appreciate, um, was on some pretty impressive Minnesota Twin teams
Mm.
with Gardner, um, with Morneau, Mauer,
Yeah, Johan.
yeah, Johan. I mean, they were some pretty significant teams out there,
Mm.
and he was always at the heart of it. Um, when he went to Anaheim, I mean, thank God he went to Anaheim, because had he not, and he ended up in Texas or Seattle, they probably would have won some World Series. But I'll tell you what, um, we're superstars tend to just kind of fall off the face of the earth. I mean, him, Guerrero, sharing an outfield.
You'd think they would have done a lot better,
That's a
but
dream outfield.
you're right. Yeah, there's something about L.A. The L.A. Angels that just kind of sucks the life out of guys. It happened to Pujols, happened to Hamilton. Uh,
It's called so Hamilton was a unique um, kind of deal because he just went to Anaheim and couldn't play, and then he went back to Texas and played pretty well when he went back.
Mhm.
Rules get old.
Yeah, Pujols was
I mean,
dipping his
he already
bottom.
gave you 15 years by that point, and was falling off.
Yeah.
But the problem with Anaheim is just they never give you any pitching.
Yep. Except
And
for Jared Weaver for a brief stretch there.
yeah, um, and
Bartolo Colon was Bartolo Colon. Like, he was on their team for a while there, right?
oh yeah. Bartolo played for everybody. He
True.
so his longest stints were Cleveland, who he
Yeah.
started with,
Yeah.
Oakland, who he played with for I think we had him 3 or 4 years,
Mm.
and then the Mets,
Oh,
and
right,
then
right, right.
he went to Anaheim. He went to
He was on the Red Sox for a stretch there.
he was on the Sox,
Yeah.
Yankees. Um, he had a taste of everybody. Um, but yeah, Anaheim's a rough one.
I'll tell you
Anaheim,
what. Um, Interesting. Just um, going back to my mind's eye about David Wright, I, um, my initial thought of it was like what you said, career cut short by injuries, kind of chronic injuries, couldn't stay healthy, and it's a real freaking shame because he showed such talent. And I was expecting to pull up his stats and kind of see like, ah, man, he had those few good years, and maybe he would have projected to be like, a Hall of Famer, but his stats actually are better than I was expecting. Like he actually got a few more years under his belt than I thought initially. Like I thought he was gonna like still be like, like in the high 100s in terms of home runs. He was 242 dingers, 1,777 hits. Like you could see that he was on that track. And you wonder what would have happened in I think it was 2006 that the Mets played the Cardinals in the NLCS, and I think that was the season that he was doing. I mean, he was an All Star that year, and he was ninth in MVP voting that year. And I remember the Mets were close. That was one of those years where they were close, and there was some like rumblings about like, well, is Dave Wright gonna be you know the new hope for the Mets?
Mm-hmm.
And it just turned unfortunately on them and him.
Yeah, no, he was one of those guys where you watched him play and you liked what he did.
Mm.
He was Pedroia on third base.
Yeah,
That's kind of what when he had the concussion and then he came back with the protective hat for the field,
right.
and it looked ridiculous. But
Sure did.
I mean, I don't blame him for trying to, extend his career. Um, and be in good faith with his contract too, which was part of it. But I just feel like the Mets are kind of like the Jets. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
like their sister franchises where they're just they're just snake bit.
yeah.
Um, I mean the Mets, were good enough to beat your silly Red Sox. Um, but
Yes.
aside from
Don't
that,
remind Matt. It's a good thing Matt. If
yeah,
you're lucky Matt's not here to hear
yeah, I'm talking all tough because he's not here. Um, but I mean, aside from that, they've pretty much been that franchise where they've always looked for, um, that breakthrough, and they've certainly paid for it. And
Yeah.
they did it again this year, but you know they just can't. They just can't find it. But yeah, Wright was one of those guys that I really liked.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if Lindor can keep working his magic there for the Mets. Maybe he'll help him push push him over the line. Hey, yeah, they're despite since I don't have all that entrenched hatred and animosity from '86 because I wasn't cognizant yet of that horrible crushing defeat. I don't I don't have as much of the hate energy for the Mets as maybe other Sox fans
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
So
not as much vitriol.
no.
Well, I'll tell you what, Soto and Lindor
Mm,
could be a hell of a 1-2 punch. Um,
yeah.
so we're not going to go through all these guys.
No.
Anybody stick out for you on the guys who fell off?
Let's take a look here. I mean, certainly none of them come anywhere even close to being in the Hall of Fame. So, you know, see you later. Bye bye, as far as I'm concerned.
I'm curious about. I'm curious about this
Oh,
guy.
Cargo? Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a soft spot because he was with my guys. I was sad that they traded him away for 1 year of Matt Holiday. Um, yeah, maybe not as impressive as I thought. I mean, he had some pretty good years though.
I remember him being like someone who's like, "Oh, watch out for Carlos Gonzalez. Like he's gonna be a force with how his offensive numbers were trending." But
His swing, his swing was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And I'll tell you what. So this is another. We talked about those trade trees.
mm,
He's another interesting
yeah,
one. Let me go. Let me just for giggles. I'm gonna give you a little
mm,
snapshot of his. His is an interesting one because we get him from Chicago. Actually, I didn't realize he went. Oh, we got him from Arizona.
oh.
So we got him with Brett Anderson.
mm,
Do you remember him? Chris Carter, who was supposed to be the next big thing. Um, and Greg Smith. I'm sorry. Yeah, Greg Smith, who was another good one. Cleveland was supposed to be another great pitcher. And I don't remember Aaron Cunningham, but pretty much for Dan Herron. Connor Robinson, I don't know if he did too much. Um, and then he went to um to Colorado with Houston Street and Greg Smith.
mm.
Uh, and the funny thing is, Greg Smith had a better year for us than Cargo did. Cargo was still kind of like that high prospect,
Yeah.
right? But I mean, that turned into some other stuff because let me show you another little interesting trade tree. So we look at Mr. Holiday. We went and traded Holiday away to St. Louis, and we ended up getting Brett Wallace, who we'll talk about,
Mm.
Shane Peterson, and Clayton Morrison. Brett Wallace was supposed to be the next big player. Like he was
They
like
just didn't
number
even
one.
bring it up. Yeah, what happened to him?
Yeah, he was the number one like prospect. Um, I think overall in the draft, and like he was a big dude. We ended up dumping him to I think Toronto.
Huh.
Yeah, Toronto from Michael Taylor. And if I follow this tree with Michael Taylor, it gets bigger and bigger and
Oh,
bigger because
jeez.
Taylor was supposed to be the same as Wallace, and it was just trading prospect for prospect, and it just turned into quite the transaction train. So those are the two though that stand out to me is
Mm.
Cargo, um, and now I'm forgetting, and Adam
Kinsler?
Jones.
Oh, Adam Jones. Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, Adam
Adam.
Jones was kind of one of those players that I feel like he was stuck on a lot of bad Orioles teams. So he was always considered like one of those really good players that you just,
Yeah,
that's just lost on a bad Orioles team.
yeah. He had those intangibles to me though
Mm,
that like the eyeball test
mm,
made me think that he was better than he was. I love Zobrist. I love the fact that he was a utility player
mm.
and he could still put up numbers, but he's not a
And
Hall.
was he the World Series MVP when the Cubbies won?
I think he was. I think he might have been. Yeah, yeah. He. I mean, he was part of some pretty good teams. And again, I might be a little biased because he ended up coming to me for a little bit.
Mm.
Um, after he left the Royals.
Always comes back to your
Hell
precious
yeah,
athletics.
hell yeah. So
Yep,
he,
World Series MVP. Yeah.
you go. So he was with the Rays, me, Royals, Cubs.
Wow, they were the Tampa Bay Devil Rays all the way through 2007.
Yes, sir.
Huh. I still
Yeah,
think it's
and then
kind of
they
It's kind of dumb that they're the Rays now. Like, stay the Devil Rays, you freaking clowns.
Listen, my high school team's still the Blue Devils. We're not afraid of you.
Like, what the hell?
Yeah. Well, sir, glad to close it out with you.
Absolutely, we're able to, uh, pitch into these extra innings and
Yeah.
close out the list.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is again, we didn't finish everything we talked about. I even teased earlier before we started recording.
Yeah.
I teased the potential scandal um, in Oakland that may have been a deciding factor in moving them away.
Really?
Yeah.
Ooh.
So, long story short, because I feel like I gotta share.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I don't know if there's any correlation, but word on the street is that the MLB and the team may have had some insider knowledge that there may have been some corruption in the city,
Oh,
and the mayor has now been indicted, I believe, on federal charges and of um, uh, kind of pay to play kind of deal. So in order to get elected, there was some money exchanging hands, and then all of a sudden there was some favors done while they were in office, as far as like people getting contracts with the city, things like that. And so now, from what I understand, there's criminal charges being brought on by the feds,
whoa.
mayor of Oakland, and there are some rumors that um, because of this, it um, put Oakland, the city itself, in the relationship with the A's, building a new stadium um, in jeopardy. And so
Wow.
that was one of the deciding factors in the franchise actually leaving Oakland, was that there was rumbles, potential conspiracy and controversy with the current mayor.
Phew. That sounds like something that could be like, I don't know, made into like a whole TV season or something.
Dude, all I can think about is like,
The Wire or something.
yeah. I think The Wire would be um, more exciting. Almost like what was the what? And you're the movie guy. What's the movie that was named after an attorney? Um, oh, it was Sandra Bullock.
Oh, that was named after an attorney?
Like she played an attorney.
Sandra Bullock, attorney.
Oh my god, I keep getting Jerry Maguire in my head, and it's not it. Oh boy, maybe it's the wrong lady. Sorry. This is really exciting for people who are actually watching this show.
Oh yeah. Well, Aaron Brockovich. Aaron
Yes.
Brockovich, Julia Roberts. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
Julia Robb. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I envision it being told by in that frame where it's the prosecuting attorney doing
Nice.
some sort of investigation on right.
I mean, it kind of sounds like you already got your script idea. Sounds like you need to start writing, Greco. Add
Buddy,
screenwriter to your never-ending list of jack of all trades.
I ain't doing I ain't doing any of that shit without you. So you're getting that. You're getting that. You're the movie guy. So but all right, well let's end this Wave It Fair podcast for now. Mr. Taylor, we missed you for the latter half. Mr. Rolo,
Always a pleasure.
always a pleasure. Did 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 uh did you think we covered the Hall of Fame all right with Mr. Taylor?
I think so.
It's hard sometimes when you don't have the stories of the '70s to serenade you
Uh,
through the '90s.
I mean, he would have been able to wax eloquent a little bit more on Dave Parker, I'm sure, but
He certainly would have, and he would have had some nice Ozzie Smith stories.
yes.
Yes. So, all right, man. I'll talk to you.
Yeah.
This ends January 21st. This is not going up on time. I guarantee you.